This is the panel discussion for infrastructure funding and current economic and business climate effects on pavement preservation. We couldn't have thought of a longer title, but I think we did well there, right, John? The panel up here is going to be Scott Metcalf from Argonne, John Coplantz from Oregon DOT, Jason Simmons from Utah DOT, and I will be representing Washington State DOT as well. I think what our ideas are is we'll have some questions on some of these slides. We'll actually have some answers from the panel, and also Jason Dietz will be helping us out in the back there with the microphone. So if you guys do have a question or want to insert a comment or how you guys are doing things, it would be great to know who you are, who you're representing, and then your question or comment, okay? Like I said, we'll do panel responses, roving microphone for audience responses, and then also, is there something that we're missing on these questions that we need to talk about too? That's also up for discussion. The broad themes are, well, it's been a while since we met, but talking about funding, because obviously that's a bit of an issue with the IIJA and funding for preservation in general. Just some of the economic and business climate, materials and supply chain, and then workforce issues. I know that we've already had a discussion about workforce issues already, and how it's difficult to get people and difficult to get quality people. So if we're missing anything, definitely don't be shy to add on to that. So we have a slide up for each one of these. We're going to start with funding, and then we're going to pass the microphone up here, and then, like I said, Jason has one back there. One of the first questions is, has IIJA funding changed your overall pavement program? Another question, I don't know how we might want to just group these together when we answer whether or not IIJA funds are going to pavement preservation, rehab, or both. And are they adding to projects covering shortfalls or both, or any other IIJA or funding related projects or topics? So John, I'll let you go ahead and start your answer.
Okay, good afternoon everybody. John Coplantz from Oregon Department of Transportation. For Oregon, IIJA funding has helped our pavement preservation program. I saw an earlier slide, I think, that showed that the gentleman that talked about the reauthorization on steroids, it was a 30% increase or something like that. I would love to be able to report to you that we did a 30% increase in our pavement preservation program, and the reality is we did not. We have a lot of that IIJA money going to safety, as well as what I guess we call active transportation network, which is the the sidewalks and those types of infrastructure to kind of get that stuff going along. There's been a lot more investment in that recently in the last couple of step cycles in Oregon. But pavement did get an increase. Pavement got about 5%. Basically this IIJA money is essentially a 5-year addition to our program, and with it we're going to be doing primarily rehabilitation work rather than pavement preservation. But what it's going to do is it's actually going to allow us to shift some money around so that we can do a little bit more pavement preservation money with money that we were going to have to cut back out of it. As far as new projects go, I would like to say it's all going to new projects, but something happened last year, this year actually, and that's inflation, and it hit hard. I mean, really hard. So about half of this money is really going right now. It's going to cover shortfalls in budgeted projects that are already in the program that are under development right now, and just to keep them alive and continue developing them. We've had to take that IIJA allocation, about half of it, and just literally cover that increase to keep them going. I wish I had better news there, but that's just the reality of the situation. And I guess that's it for Oregon. I'll let others talk, and we'll see. I have other things I could talk about funding, but I'm going to include them in my state presentation.
Utah's in a very fortunate situation when it comes to pavement preservation, and we have enough money to maintain our status quo. Well, we did, unless inflation eats at that. But so the IIJA money will not have any impact on our overall pavement preservation program because we've already demonstrated we need a certain amount of money, right? We're going to get that. It's possible some of that backfills and covers some of those shortfalls to keep our program whole from going. The projects that were in 22, 23, they could backfill from that. Our finance people are masters at a shell game. They move money all over the place, so really hard to know where it ends up at the end of the day. I think in this case, a lot of it will go to structures and safety stuff, like he said, from there. Maybe some of the capacity type stuff, but we have a lot of state money. So the way we run is our preservation and rehab takes up almost all of our federal money. It gets shifted to safety, preservation, rehab for pavement, bridges, all of that stuff. And the state funds all of the capacity projects. And so they have that large pot of state money that lets them move stuff all over the place and make it work. So, but yeah, in this case, no impact to us because we had our set money, we still have our set money, and it will be up to us to try to get more money to account for the inflation. I think we'll talk about that some more in a minute in another slide.
So from an industry perspective, Scott Metcalf with Oregon, inflation is real, it's here. It is not intrinsic, it's not gonna retrench itself. But I think that the funding side, the grants that we saw in the website would be grants.gov is where you need to go. And you look at the grants.gov, and the current administration has put a significant amount of money, billions of dollars, into grants. If you are a local agency or you're a state agency in charge of some local agencies, literally there's $50 million per state for local agencies direct from federal governments to local agencies for safety. They have to have a safety program, they implement that. So this program, it's there, but it's there for people that will take the time to write the grants. And all of a sudden now you got to think of New Mexico and Deming, New Mexico competing against Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles has 27 grant writers. If your state doesn't have grant writers or your local agency doesn't have grant writers, you are going to be left behind in this current funding package.
So Kim Schofield, Washington State DOT, and IIJA has not affected our state nearly as much as our Move Ahead Washington package. So we were fortunate enough this year to get a package through our legislature that funded about $16 billion over 16 years, and that was for everything. The portion of that for pavement or for preservation for all assets was about 1.6 billion over, over 10 years. I meant to say 10 years. So a huge amount of money for us. So we kind of have to combine Move Ahead Washington money with the IIJA. Ultimately, yes, we have more money for pavement preservation. Our pavement preservation was funded at about 50% prior to this year, and we're going up to about 80 next year and up to 100% funding after that. So we were very fortunate to have both these packages help us in our pavement program in general. Some of it will go to pavement preservation, some of it will go to rehab, some of it will go to new construction. There's lots that are going to, like what John said, active transportation, structures, all that kind of stuff. We definitely are going to be covering our shortfalls. Inflation has gone up drastically from our pavement, or all of our programs that we've seen. The bids come in, and we're awarding projects, even if they're 50% over our engineer's estimate, we're awarding them. So we're actually using some of this money to cover our shortfalls for that. So I would say let's open it up to you guys, comments that you have. So remember to tell us who you are, what state you're from, or what who you're representing, I should say. But if you have any questions, raise your hand. Jason will get to you. There you go.
Thanks for this. Scott Gibson, Regional Transportation Commission of Washoe County in Reno, Nevada. On the aspect of the safety money, one of the things that we've found is NDOT has, our state agency, has a lot of the safety money to move down, and if we have projects in our local area that is allowing us as a local agency to access that safety money and for active transportation and safety purposes, but then piling on the rehabilitation and reconstruction on the pavement side as well and leveraging that. Are you finding any of those opportunities through your state agencies to get money down to your local partners?
I would say for Washington, yes. A lot of our local agencies will benefit from the money that we have coming towards us. I think the hardest part is partnering ADA or active transportation projects with a pavement preservation project so that we don't do a pavement preservation project and then have to go rip it up to do ADA or something like that. So some of our pavement preservation projects are being delayed by a few years so that they can design the active transportation things into those projects.
I can't speak on the local side, but I know that what Kim just said is definitely true for our state projects where we have a pavement preservation piece of it that it basically is waiting, patiently waiting for the active transportation piece so that they can go together. And I know we're doing a lot of, I should have mentioned, a lot of this is grants, and like every state, I'm sure they're writing a lot of grants, and I've seen the grant list, and probably for pavement, one of the more significant ones will be where I think they're calling it Great Streets now, but it's essentially that Complete Streets, actually, I think is what they're calling it. I think they're calling it Great Streets, but it's really a Complete Streets approach, where you're doing everything, from the sidewalk, the street, the drainage if necessary, and the full thing. And of course, those kind of projects cost millions of dollars a mile. So you're not going to get a lot of paving done with them, but they actually can take, if you do get them, it's kind of nice because you don't have to deal with those pavements for quite a while.
I would add that the devil's in the details, right? And how you write it. And if you look at chip seals and pavement preservation treatments, and you say there's a safety aspect to it, and apply it to the safety aspect, not the life extension benefits or the other benefits of longevity, but you really hone in on the safety aspects of microsurfacing, giving higher skid. And if you have traffic data in your safety that says we have accidents at these intersections during the winter because of icing or skid issues, that you can mitigate accidents, that's an opportunity. So it's really, how do you interpret what the grant is you're writing for?
Rex Eberly with NCPP. Y'all just said something that kind of bothers me in a preservation world, that we're parking preservation projects, which are really supposed to be a timed project at the right treatment at the right time, and we're waiting for other things to catch up. How do we know then that in 3 years, when everything else catches up, that preservation shouldn't now be a rehab because we wasted our time waiting on other things? How do we handle that? Sorry, waste may not be the right term, but...
Well, since I was one of the ones that mentioned that, we have a nomenclature issue in our state, and I misspoke to your point. We call our rehab program gets thrown into something we call a preservation program in our state. So we don't, thank goodness, we're not delaying a chip seal because of these issues, but we are delaying that paving work, and as long as it's not a reconstruct, it's generally speaking you end up paying more to maintain it while you wait. Sometimes you may have to convert what you thought you were going to do with 2 inches to 3 or something like that. But yeah, that's the issue that we're running into. Sorry, I should have clarified that.
And I would agree. There are times where we've changed a preservation treatment to a rehabilitation treatment because we have to wait. And it doesn't make sense to go out and do a chip seal when it's only going to last for 2 years until a sidewalk comes in or something like that. So we actually consciously make those decisions on a case-by-case basis. So we are losing some to a preservation scheme versus a rehabilitation scheme, but we're making, I think, overall, the right decision for that pavement so that we're getting the longest life out of it. Nice and quiet, that's okay. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide that I put up here. So economic and business climate, some of the questions that we came up with, which you can come up with your own as well. How are we handling inflationary effects in your overall pavement program? We kind of talked about it already, but have we delayed or shortened projects? Are we doing anything differently? And how are we balancing risk between agency and bidders for like fuel and asphalt escalation in those types of projects? The other topics that we have down here are potentially EPDs and talking about that and whether that's come in. And I think John's probably the state that's farthest along in that area. And then, of course, we already talked about Buy America as well. So
Let's talk a little inflation here, because that's the biggest piece, and we alluded to it with the previous question. It hurts big time. We're looking at needing about 20% more funding to maintain our status quo in preservation and rehab versus what we've had in the past years. So I have a pot of $200 million for preservation and rehab, and that's going to have to be $240. Otherwise, we're going to struggle to maintain the pavement condition, which is our goal. We're putting together those numbers now to take to our commission. The commission cycle is in April, and that's when those funding conditions get met. So time will tell whether we can get that money or not, or whether we have to adjust. I'm confident that we will get it, or eventually. I've always said that pavement is a pay me now or pay me more later proposition, but when the road falls apart, they'll give me the money. Or at least that's what's happened historically. We've been down this road before. It's not new for anybody that's been around in a while, right? 2008, when everything spiked up there, we had a bailout in 2008 in the ARA funds, the American Reinvestment Act, that put money straight to preservation in that title. The IAJ funds don't list out preservation, right? We all said that, well, it's not going to have an impact of our program. So is there a bailout coming this time? I don't see it, but maybe we'll see. What we did then and what we're doing now is a combination of delaying projects and reducing scope. I mean, those are the two tools in our toolbox to combat this. So to your point, Rex, right, it's all about timing and making decisions. I know it doesn't make sense to put the chip seal down when it lasts 2 years, like Kim said, but how many of us have put down Band-Aid pavement preservation treatments that lasted a lot longer than people said that they were going to last? And so we are cutting scope on jobs and stuff that we were going to do what we call a functional repair, like 1.5 inches of SMA or 2 inches of HMA type work. We're doing chip seals instead of those on some of those roads that are on that borderline condition phase, and then some of those jobs we're kicking out. You know, it's a balancing act, right? We're picking the ones that we think have the shallowest deterioration curve to kick out so that we can still do the preservation when the time comes. And if we miss, then we're going to have to change that to rehab or a higher category in the future as it dwindles down that road. And you do those two things and you weather the storm and hope the money comes in the future. That's all that you really can do.
That's why I love working in Utah, reality. So obviously in the economic business climate, from our concerns, there's EPDs. We're trying to figure out what does it mean, how are agencies going to utilize it, do you pick winners, do you pick losers from it? So at the end of the day, I give you all this data to an agency and you ask for it and you get this number. What decisions are you going to make? Do we know? What's the consequence to the contractor? You're asking the contractors to gather all this information, submit it to you, but find me the contractor that owns the quarry, owns the refinery, owns the cement plant, owns everything, is fully vertically integrated, has total control over his supply chain, and you're asking that contractor to give you the EPDs. It's a difficult process. So we want, as industry, are concerned about trying to do that for economic business cycle. How much money do we invest before we don't know where we're going or we're going someplace? What's the decisions going to be? We'd like to understand that. And Buy America, Tim already alluded to that, but we are feverishly trying to figure that out, work on that, because a significant portion of your liquid asphalt is brought in from Canada, brought in from other countries, that is not produced right here. So you have a lot of import.
I didn't mention it when he gave the presentation before, and we'll come back to where I'm going to follow up on your Buy America. Currently, that liquid asphalt is exempt from Buy America, right? Is there a fear that that provision is going to change?
So Tim might be able to answer a little bit more on that, but on that, the fear is that what do they call it, waiver we have is till November 2022. So come November, right after the elections, lo and behold, the Buy America clause could implement back into us. So we have a current waiver. We're not guaranteed to that waiver. So we think there's an asphalt waiver we're working through with federal highways that talks about binder, and if a binder adheres rock, that we could get that waiver for emulsion. But you know what that means? A court. And it means legal and attorneys. And so there's an opinion, and we need to secure that. So industry, FP2, is working with legal analysis to write a legal opinion that we could hand to you, the state agencies, to hand that to the federal government and say, this is excluded.
As far as Oregon is concerned, how we're handling inflation is like everybody else's. But what struck me is, and I thought I'd mention it if it wasn't obvious, at least, all stuff we do, bridges, pavement, curb ramps, you name it, all that stuff that we do is feeling the bite. So the good news is we're all feeling it, but nobody's getting extra money. They're not taking more away from pavement. We're containing our loss within pavement, so to speak, and having to rebalance that program, which is important, because sometimes these other things are, they come in and they have a shortfall and they take your money. So I've experienced that before. Basically, just having to change your portfolio. That's how we're dealing with it. And Jason had mentioned that 20% number. And I did some back of the napkin calculations. It's exactly what I come up with. My hope is that we saw a spike and that it's just going to stay level. I'd like to think that's what's going to happen, but I have no way to know that for sure. Fuel escalation, I put that bullet in there actually on this thing because the paving side of the house, the hot mix side of the house, all that stuff, the standard process is to have an escalation clause. That's typically not what we would do in a contract for pavement preservation work. It has had some effect on some of that work volume, but a lot of that stuff's done through the simpler maintenance contracts. So, I don't know if we're gonna change that, but that's something we might have to look at. That's about all I had to say. So I'd open it up for others that might have some thoughts on this topic.
Drew with Alaska. It's just a comment that Alaska has seen the same thing, that just everything is escalated in price. Befitted remote airports come in 70% over the engineer's estimate. And a lot of our highway jobs are also coming in about 30% over. So some of them are still coming in close, but across the board, it just seems like everything in Alaska has really increased in price.
So of the 20% increase, inflationary increase that you're seeing, how much of that's material related and how much of that is labor related? And is there a way to track that?
I don't have those numbers in Utah because my numbers are based off of contractor bid prices. And there's no way for me to know how they're breaking that down between the two. Yeah. No idea.
Yeah, and I was looking at it purely from a dollar per mile. What this project cost me, dollar per mile versus what it would have cost me.
Yeah, I don't know that we know that either. I think we've seen some higher material prices, but we don't know what that's due to, whether that's just grouped in with labor or if it's actually material prices. On asphalt binder, we definitely have seen that because of the way that it's paid for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing there's a piece of both, right? If you look at the inflation rates overall, you're closer to 10% on all of your goods, and I would just assume your materials are probably in that realm, and then your labor is added on top, but that's pure assumption. And I will speak to my 20% number because Drew put something a little higher. We're pretty good at advertising our projects earlier in the year, so there's a little lag in there. The stuff that's going out now or is going to go out in the next couple of months, it may be even higher than that, right? And I'm always playing a catch-up game trying to bid those numbers.
Do you guys index each of your states for fuel and materials?
We do, yes.
We do for binders.
Binder, yeah.
So binders only, fuel and binder? Not fuel. So, I mean, fuel obviously direct cost to contractors. Those machines don't run on pixie fairy dust yet, but California's working on it.
I'll just add one thing that we've talked about in Washington when we saw the escalation prices are coming in. We talked about adding a fuel escalator, and I was surprised when we had that conversation with the contractors. They were hesitant to add it because it can hurt them and it can help them. So at that time, they were hesitant to add it. I think they're sort of kicking themselves right now because they could have probably gained a lot of money over this summer because it was talked about in the spring. But there is definitely a hesitation because it can go either way. So we currently in Washington, we have an asphalt escalation clause. We currently do not have one for fuel. And we know that obviously diesel fuel has, it's gone way up and the contractors are eating that cost. So it's been a huge cost for them, for sure. I think overall, Washington is seeing, we're not shortening any of our projects. I see one over there. We're not shortening any of our projects. We're not delaying any of our projects, at least at this time, unless it's for a combination with ADA or complete streets or anything like that due to inflation. But we're just eating that bullet and seeing how far the funding will get us.
Scott Gibson, RTC. Yeah, in our agency, ours is based on fuel, an indexed fuel tax, and so we've actually, I think it went up a couple cents per gallon to our benefit from things increasing. And it was also interesting because there was a lot of discussion about, having a fuel tax holiday and that type of thing on both the federal level and the state level. And fortunately, ours is locked in legislatively so that that wasn't anything that anybody was able to try and do for us. And then we also saw about the same 20% increases in bid prices. And the way we plan our programs out, we did to delay some projects that we call bullpen projects, designed and ready to go, but no, they may be on the chopping block depending on what the funding conditions are.
Hi, Greg Duncan, Applied Pavement Technology. Just wondering if you're seeing additional bidders coming to do that kind of work. Are there hungrier contractors? Are they, or are people sort of staying home and doing their normal thing?
For Washington, we're seeing the same amount of bidders, if not less, because everybody is so busy with other projects other than DOT projects. So we've actually seen sort of a decrease in bidders. Anybody else?
It's not really my expertise, but I think I know that we've had to do some non-paving stuff that we had difficulty letting some sign contracts work out because that depended a lot on the price of the sign materials and they were just, really we had one bidder on a project that actually comes out of the pavement money. It's kind of a unique thing, but that's why I know about it. That was last year. This year, we had 3 bidders like we were expecting, and things kind of stabilized. So I guess my thought is maybe a year ago, we might have had something going on, but what I've noticed now is, and I've noticed it in the paving stuff, it seems to be about where it's always been.
Yeah, we're about the same. No decrease in what's going on. I've always viewed this as a if you build it, they will come proposition, right? But the thing you have to be careful in pavement preservation is we try new things or dip our toes. Like we say, I don't do microsurfacing, now I want a microsurface. The only way you're going to get that contractor to buy the equipment and get another bidder is if you put out enough microsurface work, right? But you need the bidder before the microsurface, and so it's all cyclical, right? And so if you have good communication between the agency and industry, and you're consistent in your future goals, I think you'll get your consistent contractors, which is what we've seen in Utah.
I think we've seen multiple competitors, and the same, Jerry, I'm sure you've seen the same amount of people bidding your projects every year. Haven't seen a decrease.
Actually, we've had a few where we've had projects where we've only had, I'm Jerry with the City of Roseville, California, streets manager, but we have had projects where we've only had one bidder in the past, and we don't know if it was late in the season or what happened, but it was way too high. The engineer's bid was, our estimate was one thing, it was 50% more, and we've gone ahead and rejected that bid and then bid it later to contact all the contractors, say, hey, why didn't you bid it? Can you get a bid the next one? And then we just do it later is what we've done in the past. So I know you've said that you guys 50% more, you're going ahead and awarding that bid. Do you do that all the time? I do have a question in here. Do you do that all the time, or will you say, you know what, we've only got 1 or 2 bids. You guys are 50 to 60% more. We think there's like a 20% is inflation, but 30% is like, okay, profit, I don't know. Do you reject that and do it again, or what do you guys do?
It totally depends on the project and who's bidding and where it is and what time of year it's bid and all that kind of stuff. So we take all that into consideration. So for instance, we had a project that we let, I think it was in June, and it was a big concrete panel replacement project at our I-205 interchange. So horrible traffic control issues and all this kind of stuff. So we let it late, which we shouldn't have, and we only got one bidder, and the price was, I think, almost 100% more than what we had estimated. We ended up saying, let's go ahead and bid it, or award it, because if we waited till next year, we're missing that opportunity for that rehabilitation, because we actually had a full reconstruction or some kind of rehabilitation scheduled down the road as well. So in that instance, we did. There have been other instances where we think that we're getting bamboozled, and we'll say, no, we'll pull this back, and we can wait a year, or we'll rebid it or something. So
that's good to hear, because
yeah,
when
totally
you said earlier
depends.
we awarded 50% no matter what, I'm like, wait a minute, we're all taxpayers here. That's our money that you're spending.
Yes. Yeah,
and we can't be throwing it away. But
Yeah.
but then again, you got to be prudent with it and get the projects done. So
Yep, and it's totally depending on what project it is, where it is, when it was put on ad and everything. So yeah, I should have clarified. Anything else on that one, or should we go to materials and supply chain?
I would also point out that what we don't have in New Mexico and California is we have an annual work window. We have 240 work days easily. She has exactly 120 work days to get it all done, and Alaska has even fewer. So time value of money and what they can get done has to happen.
I guess I just wanted to add, some of this we caught in the Office of Project Letting before, before we went to bid it. We increased our budget, and thank gosh we were, we were able to get it. The project increased enough that, yeah, if it was over, maybe it was only 5% over, whatever, but it was over. It didn't have to go back to our Transportation Commission to get approval for this. But we have had those cases where we've had to do that. We had to go back to the Transportation Commission, say, we need, X money to do this. And that actually works in the taxpayer's favor, because we don't want to do that unless we think we have to. And we had a particular case. I know there was a project in Bend that was probably about 50% more. And it wasn't just pure pavement, it was pavement, sidewalk, curb ramps, the whole 9 yards. So, those kind of projects, sometimes they're just like, this is important, we have to do it.
Next topic is materials and supply chain, and we know that some of these overlap, so forgive us for that. But some of the questions we asked ourselves is, have you faced material shortages in your pavement preservation program that have caused you to accept a different treatment or a different product? And that's a little bit different than we've talked about already. Have you seen changes in availability of aggregates or ability to get aggregates crushed? How has trucking availability impacted pavement projects, and other things like polymer shortages or lack of approved products, things like that. So I guess I'll go ahead and start on this one, pass it down this way. Material shortages, we've never accepted a different treatment or a different product after we've put something out to bid. Besides like minor change orders or something like that. But we've never switched from, say, a chip seal or a microsurfacing to a chip seal or something like that. We've never done that. If that were to happen, we would probably rebid the project. We have definitely seen some problems with getting aggregates crushed on time just because we only have so many contractors. So that's definitely been an issue for us in Washington. Trucking is definitely an issue in terms of fuel and in terms of labor shortages. That's definitely been another struggle for us. I know that we've had a couple of instances of not having an approved product and having to go through, find a different alternative after the contract is let for a specific product, not necessarily materials usually, but different products and stuff like that. So we have seen that, but that's very few and far between. Usually that would be a pretty big change for us. So that's kind of what we've seen in Washington.
In Oregon, these questions were, I'd heard that other parts of the world had more issues with materials and supply chain, and so I kind of wanted to put that out there. But in Oregon, probably the predominant effect has been the trucking. Trucking has been a big problem, and it's affecting our contractors' ability to get projects done on time. Then sometimes they have to go into the next year. It's a big deal. And I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that. The aggregates have been an issue sometimes for us as well. And we're kind of like New Mexico, and probably half our chip seals we do ourselves. And it's all about the planning and getting your rock crushed. And oftentimes we do rock crushing contracts separately. We'll get those, and we'll do them a year ahead of time, or we'll do it out of a different biennium's budget. So getting that, once you start throwing a spoke in that wheel, it kind of has ramifications, and that has been an issue for us in the last year. But other than that, no, the material shortages haven't really affected us. We've been able to get the same materials and the emulsions we wanted, and really hasn't changed our preservation treatments.
On the asphalt side of things, we've been good. One supplier couldn't get a polymer for a high mod asphalt, but besides that, it didn't change the project at all. There was just one issue that a supplier was having, and I think they worked through that. The only place we've really had problems is on the concrete side of things, and we went through a cement shortage a little bit there in the spring. Actually, the jobs ended up getting built, but we had to push back some paving projects because we couldn't get concrete to do the pedestrian access ramps and the ADA clause, which was not the way you want to do business, but that's what happened from there. But overall, we've been pretty lucky to not have any problems here.
Yeah, I probably had more times that I'll put a little bag over my head. We've had more of our competitors call us to want to buy polymer from us. Because they were short. Supply chains, we'll talk about that in the next presentation, were really difficult. So there were a lot of nail biting where maybe some of our polymer sheds would be full or half empty in the summer. I hope that truck shows up. Where's that truck? Because we need that truck here today to make polymer for tomorrow, or we need to call someone and say, sorry. So it was really, supply chain was really, really tight. And I know that was in polymers for emulsions, latex polymers. We used to stockpile a lot of stuff in rail cars, and it just wasn't available. So it was, you had to order early and order often and really stay on top of it.
A big thank you to Scott and any industry that's in that room, as he's doing all that nail biting. You just heard the 3 DOTs say we didn't have a problem, right? So kudos to industry for making that flow.
Yeah, well, I'll give you one example, and I'll talk about this in my next presentation. A chemical supplier, they're mostly based on the East Coast. Let's say they're Florida, between Georgia and Florida for emulsifiers. Order a load, not a problem, put it in. 2 weeks later, okay, we should be seeing these trucks. We should be, oh yeah, no, your load's good. See you. You guys will be there June 1st, no problem. June 1st, where's my load? Oh, well, you know, the trucker didn't pick it up 4 days ago in Miami. And we're trying to find a truck. Okay. Well, you know, am I going to have it here? Because by June 7th, I don't have huge tanks. I mean, I'm down to a couple of feet. Yeah, we think we can get it. Call you back tomorrow. Okay, phone doesn't ring tomorrow. Hey, where are we at? Well, we got it. We do have a truck, but new freight rate. Instead of $1,800 to cross the U.S., it's $18,000. 18,000. What? I thought we had an agreement. I thought we had, you know, some delivered, you know, kind of terms. Yeah, if you want it, you need it, $18,000. So those are some of the inflationary pressures that we felt that we had fixed cost to you, and those are the risks that we look at. So when this trucking shortage comes out, and we're talking hazardous materials or materials that need to be at least placarded because of corrosive environments, and you need the right driver and the right truck, it's a big, big challenge.
Okay, yeah, sure, why not? So these are all the workforce questions. I'm not going to read them. You can read them through yourself right there. You know, I think this is the workforce and qualified technicians on both sides, from the DOT, the state agencies, the local agencies, and the contractor, is it's an issue that's building, right? We can see it all coming to impact us. I know in Utah we are really struggling to have qualified technicians inside our DOT to do any inspection. Years ago, we went to a Trans-Tech program where we have our guys working in maintenance and plowing snow in the winter, and then they come and do a construction inspection in the summer. Our maintenance sheds in the Salt Lake Valley are down about 50 employees that they can't fill. So they can't hire those positions, and we're looking at not being able to plow our snow potentially from there, and that trickles down to your qualified techs and inspection from there, right? So it's a stress, and I don't see where this is coming, how we're going to get out of this without increasing pay and all that stuff. And it seems like the contractors have the same problem going on here, right? They're struggling to bring in qualified people. As a nation, we've preached get a degree, to get a degree, get a degree, right? And not this hands-on work that our industry is. It's going to take a mindset shift. Hopefully it will come sooner than later. But I think we're all feeling the stress on this one.
Our long-term pavement pres and paving volume is contracting. That's how I see it. Our budget is pretty much held flat for the last 20 years, literally. The same dollar value that's going to our pavement program has been the same for 20 years, and the work volume has sort of dwindled, but I really am starting to see that that's going to be our new reality, and honestly our hot mix paving industry for sure is seeing that. There's been some recent consolidation in the last couple of years there. You know, a larger company coming and buying a couple small ones, that type of thing. What it's going to do is just going to drive the price up, because there's going to be a little less competition, of course, and And that's just going to be our reality. In a perfect world, we would do the same work volume every year forever, but that's not our reality in Oregon at the moment. Trends for Oregon we are seeing the same number of bidders right now that we have, so that's all good. The qualified personnel, we actually are going to have that problem as well. But I don't have a good answer for that one because I didn't prep for this particular answer. COVID was real. We had issues with that, still do. With the vaccination requirements have gone back, but we lost some people, particularly on our maintenance side, that had the expertise to do the maintenance side of the house work on pavement. They're not coming back, and partly they're not coming back because those positions are there's a budget shortfall, and they're going to cover it up with not hiring those positions, and so there we are. Just a lot, it's that brain drain, and it's not only happens at the upper end of the scale, but it's happened at the lower end of the scale, the boots on the ground folks too, and they don't pay that well, so I'm not sure how we're going to get that back. But it's where we're at.
Well, I think Washington and Oregon were probably the two toughest states on COVID, and we lost a lot of folks as well. We mandate that you must be vaccinated to work at our DOT. I don't know that all state DOTs are like that, but I know that, us too really struggled with that. We did lose a lot of our maintenance folks as well, but we did lose people throughout our agency, and we're still reeling from that. I was just telling somebody earlier today that there's at least a half a dozen, if not a dozen, job announcements that go out daily for our state DOT. All the way from a maintenance or a secretary, all the way up to an executive position. So we've definitely lost folks because of COVID. We've lost people because of retirement, not paying as much. There's a lot more design build projects going on. So just recently, those consultants have come in and offered DOT folks that have experience designing and building our contracts, knowing that design build contracts are coming, and they'll pay them twice as much if you come work for us. So we're losing a lot of people, a lot of experienced people to that as well. So in terms of qualified personnel, I think DOT for us, big time struggle. I do think that we struggle with that on the contractor side as well, and we are going to continue to struggle with that hugely in the next few years. As I mentioned before, with the IIJA, we also got this Move Ahead Washington package, which I'll talk more about in my agency report tomorrow, but we have a lot of money coming our way for pavement preservation and everything else. But in terms of pavement preservation, like I said, we went from 50% funding to 100% funding. We don't have the contractors to do that much work, let alone the DOT personnel to inspect it and do everything that we need to do. We've been contracting out some of our testing, but even when that gets contracted out, not a lot of people have that specific experience in how to test asphalt or how to inspect a chip seal. There's very few consultants out there that actually know how to do that. So we'll hire a consulting firm, and they have no experience whatsoever. So it's definitely something that we have to pay attention to. We have to do something, think differently, think outside the box, because it's hurting us big time in Washington for sure.
So our agency, we pay better than the DOT does, and our board, the director of the DOT, Christina Swallow, sits on our board as an ex officio member of our organization, and we've hired a bunch of NDOT engineers recently, and she says this is the Nevada Department of Transportation. It's not the Nevada Department of Training.
I would advocate that in an industry standpoint, workforce development is a huge thing, and that's part of FP2, and what we do in Capitol Hill is go talk to Congress and try to get the funding reallocated. Caltrans, one thing they did right, they increased the gas tax, they set the funds, and it gets indexed. So in the middle of inflation, California got an 8.5% increase in transportation funding this year. I think we might be the only state that had that. So, because we indexed our funds. And so that's something that we advocate tremendously for, is that federal highway funding, transportation funds, user funds need to be indexed to inflation, is we're all experiencing this, and we're buying less and we're getting less for our dollars. So we need to do the inflationary index. We need to fix the highway trust fund, and we need to get in front of electric vehicles and registration for electric vehicles using our state highways. Because right now they're paying nothing into the state highway fund. They're only 3 or 4% of the vehicles, but it's coming. And right now, as an electrical vote, you don't really upset them, right? If you put a $2,000 tax or a $3,000, we won't call it tax, road user fee, and index to that and some inflationary pressure for the future, they can't vote against you. Wait till there's 25, 35% of those cars are out there, and then all of a sudden that's a voting block you can't overcome.
This is a question for the agencies here. We all know we have workforce problems, the agencies, the contractors, and because of that, we're not able to get these jobs, industry's not able to get these jobs done in as timely a fashion as they would like. We have seen in the area where I do work, extended working day contracts. We've even seen some that had 365 calendar days, provisions in it, where if you get the job done within a year, they're tickled pink. What are the agencies doing here to allow for such things? Like I said, the contractors are having a difficult time putting on new crews and finding new equipment to expand to handle the abundance of work that's out there. And I mean, you guys have problems in your own maintenance crews as well, but are the designers or the departments going to extend the time in these contracts moving forward to allow for that?
So we've been price plus time in our contracts in Utah for a really long time, and the direction to the designers is to give flexibility on that start date within reason, right? We have winter comes in Utah and the job has to be done. Otherwise you're slipping to the next year, and we don't want to do that. So our overall approach is have them bid the number of days that goes into the work and give them a flexible start date to make their crews work and all of that. But once they're there, we want them to get in and get out. So we don't want to extend the length of a contract, but we are willing to slide around the start.
So what we're doing right now is contract by contract. Once it's awarded, we'll make that determination depending on what they come at us with or anything like that. But there is talk about making sure that we have enough working days in those contracts from the design side, but we have not really adjusted that right now. It's more after the contract is awarded, it gets adjusted. Yeah, it's definitely something that's coming though, especially in Washington with the amount of funding that we have. It's going to be a big issue in the next few years, for sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank our panelists here and thank everybody for your questions and comments.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.